Okay, so we have here a case study. It's a medical case study that I just got it from New England Journal of Medicine. But I want to discuss it not as a clinician, but from physiology point of view. So my discussion is more towards physiology rather than the clinical aspect of it. Okay, so here it's how it reads. Let me create a laser here so that we can read. So these are, it's a neonate. This is a neonate. You can see it's a male infant. Was born 29 weeks of gestation. This before completion of before term, that is, via spontaneous vaginal delivery. So here the key thing is this male infant was born before term because it's 29 weeks. Then shortly after birth, he developed a rapid, shallow breathing, nasal. This one, it ought to be flaring, not fairing, flaring, granting intercostal retraction. So all this rapid, shallow breathing, nasal flaring, granting intercostal retraction, it simply indicates increased work of breathing. They were breathing, this infant was breathing with difficulty. So the key thing, all this we shall say, is this increased work of breathing. Then his oxygen saturation remained low despite supplemental oxygen. So they are being given oxygen, but the saturation, the hemoglobin saturation levels were still low. So this one simply indicates this likelihood that there is a ventilation perfusion mismatch. Likely, yes, there's perfusion, but there's no ventilation. So this mismatch, of course, it will lead to what? Low saturation of oxygen. Then there is some radiology here. The chest X-ray shows a ground glass appearance with air bronchogram. Now in this case, what does this show? The ground glass appearance. This may be an indicator of many things, but likely it's because of collapsed alveoli. So what can we take here and then discuss from physics point of view, or discuss it as a science, not as a clinical case study, but from physiology point of view. So there is this element before term, that's 29 weeks. Remember, it should go up to 40, 38, 40 there. For those who are in obstetrics will tell us. And then rapid shallow breathing, this one is increased work of breathing. And then oxygen saturation remain low despite supplementary oxygen, that's ventilation perfusion mismatch. And then there's ground glass appearance. This one simply means that the alveoli are collapsed, but the areas of blood vessels and airways are still preserved. That's why we have this ground glass appearance. So in this case, it doesn't, you don't need to be an experienced clinician to tell that this one is likely to be neonatal respiratory distress syndrome, RDS. This one is simply RDS. So let's get into the science of it. Let's get into the science. We are not interested with the management. We are not interested with the pathophysiology and all this. We just want to see the science. We'll bring the element of physics. We'll bring the element of physiology, and how all these combine to bring to cause increased work of breathing. So this is now where the science is. It's a lot. So because it's a neonate born before term, we have to bring that into shape. Now you can see there's a graph here. This graph I got from BMC journal. You can follow this link. I've placed it there. You can actually follow. It's a nice read. You can go and read. So this graph here, it's very critical. It's a graph that shows we have on the x-axis we have the gestation weeks, and then on the y-axis we have the cortisol levels. And then what does it show? It shows that before the age, the gestation age of 29, the cortisol levels are low. Remember here the adrenal glands are not fully mature, so they cannot produce adequate cortisol levels. And then at age of 30 towards 35, where our case never reached, our case was at 29, so you can see the cortisol levels were so low. But at the age 30-35, you can see there is there's a rapid increase in cortisol levels. You can see cortisol levels getting to almost 8 millimole per liter, micromole per liter, that is. So there is something here. This case, it's related to being born before term, and you can see at 29 the cortisol levels are so low. So why is cortisol so important? We shall come to that. Let's come to the alveolus. Now the alveolus usually has, we can see here is our alveolus. It has some epithelial cells. Now it usually has two types of cells. We have the pneumocyte type 1 cells, which is here. This one is simply a blood gas barrier. It's the one that is traversed by oxygen before oxygen can get into the pulmonary blood, and then oxygenation of hemoglobin. It's done. Then we have these pneumocyte type 2 cells. You can see these are cell. It's an epithelial cells. You can see. And these epithelial cells, usually this type 2 epithelial cells, of course it has a DNA. All cells have DNAs. They have genetic material. So through genetic material, it usually synthesize. It usually make a surfactant. Remember, surfactant, it's actually a protein mixed with lipid. So the type 2 cells will make a protein, the surfactant protein, and then also it makes some transferase enzyme that transfer lipids, the DPCC, the one that is transferred into this surfactant protein to make it functional. So we must make a transferase enzyme, and we must make a protein, surfactant protein, and then we mix the surfactant protein and the lipid to make a functional surfactant. So that is through genetic expression. So if this neonate, the one we're having, the infant we're having is at 29 weeks, the lungs are not yet matured, the cortisol levels are so low. Remember, we need this cortisol to enhance the expression of this gene to make surfactant protein, and also to make the transferase protein enzyme that will transfer the lipid into the surfactant protein to make a functional surfactant. So here we're having a catch. Because of immaturity of the lungs, the surfactant protein are not being made, and also because of immaturity, the adrenal gland are not yet fully mature to make enough cortisol to make this type 2 cell to express enough and make surfactant. But why does surfactant matter? Remember, this is alveolus, and this alveolus, it's actually lined with a fluid. We have fluid, we have water, let's just say cold water, we have water, a layer of fluid here in the alveolus. And remember, the water has a molecule, and these water molecules have cohesive forces. So if we come to physics of it, these are the water molecules. So water molecules, they have a tendency to shrink. They have a tendency of pulling towards each other, of course, towards each other. So with this tendency, of course, if we have a water molecule here, it will tend to pull this to the alveoli to come to close together. So the surfactant that is made by type 2 cell is the one that break this surface tension, so that there is no pulling effect. There is no collapsing of the alveoli that is caused by the cohesive forces between the water molecules, as you can see here. So the essence of making surfactant is to break these cohesive forces between water molecule that line the alveoli. So because this infant doesn't make this surfactant, and then the alveoli will be small. You can see it will be small like this. So it would be small, it would be reduced in size because the water molecule are pulling toward each other and therefore pulling these alveoli closer to each other, so there is a tendency of collapsing. So if this collapses, then it reduces the radius. You can see the radius. So here we'll bring another element, the concept of physics. We have the law of Laplace. So the law of Laplace says that pressure, it's usually directly proportional to the surface tension, but inversely proportional to the radius. So if we are reducing this radius, then it's increasing. It means we actually increasing the pressure inside the alveolus, and this will mean for the atmospheric pressure to enter into the alveoli, it will be so hard because the pressure inside here is so high. So this causes increased work of breathing. Okay, so it's easier to inflate this than to inflate this, because the pressure here is so high. You can see from this relationship here that the pressure is directly proportional to what? The surface tension, and inversely proportional to the radius of the alveolus. So if we are reducing, if the alveolus is collapsing, then it means we actually increasing the alveoli pressure here. And this will mean the work of breathing will increase because it's so hard to inflate this. And this is what brings about the grunting, flaring of the nose, the need of supplemental oxygen, so that this infant can get the oxygen. And the radiology, of course, you can see this opacity, the ground glass opacity that are shown with the arrows. It's because of the atelectasis, or the collapse of the alveolus. So in essence, this is what we call the RDS. The RDS. So the RDS in the neonates, cortisol levels are so low before gestation of 30 and 35. And we need this cortisol to express the genes within the pneumocyte type 2 cells to make surfactant. Surfactant, it's like a soap. It's a surface active agent. It breaks the surface tension. So if we don't make it, then we shall have very strong surface tension within the water molecule that line the alveolus. And then the water molecules within the alveolus, because they have a lot of, there's a strong cohesive forces between the water molecule, it will tend to pull the walls of this alveoli so that it can collapse. And if it collapses, it increases the pressure here. It makes it so hard to inflate these alveoli, therefore increasing the work of breathing. And this is why the infant manifests with what? Grunting, flaring of the nose, the intercostal muscles raising up and down, just to show the increased work of breathing. So you can be asked to explain the RDS, the surfactant, and the RDS. So the key thing to remember is that surfactant is produced by pneumocyte type 2 cells. And then this surfactant, it's used to break the cohesive forces between the water molecules that line the alveolus. and therefore reducing the surface tension, and this will reduce the tendency of alveoli to shrink or to collapse. And because of this, as explained by law of Laplace, the alveolus will not, the inflation of the alveolus will be easier, therefore reducing the work of breathing. That is RDS. Thank you so much.